Horeb was afraid that veterans of the Israeli army, the Israeli intelligence, the Israeli nuclear effort would try to maintain their footprint in the history of Israel and tell their story. And he wanted to frighten them. And in this sense, he was successful.
Do you think that there is too much secrecy, the power of somebody like Horeb to destroy the life of an individual like this Brigadier General Yaakov, for example? The man's life was destroyed, and he'd been a very loyal Israeli all his life.
It happens, unfortunately, in life, of false accusations, and some innocent people are paying a high cost. I cannot see how can it be avoidable.
Israel's parliament had never debated Dimona or nuclear weapons until one MP 3 years ago forced them onto the agenda for the first time. Issam Mahul, an Israeli Arab, broke the taboo to the outrage of his colleagues. These words, uttered in the heart of Israel's democracy, was seen by his fellow MPs as a sacrilege. He wasn't allowed to finish his speech, but he'd made his point. But in his constituency during the recent election campaign, it was a different story. Here, his audience are, like him, Israeli Arabs.
أنا بقول لهم وين في أسلحة نووية وأسلحة دمار شامل إذا بدهم. أنا بقول لهم وين موجودة. في ديمونا موجودة، في خليج حيفا، في جبل علبون، في منطقة سخنين، يدفاتا. بدهم أسلحة نووية؟ بدهم أسلحة دمار شامل؟ يجوا يفتشوا، يبعثوا مفتشين، أنا باخذهم من إيدهم.
There is a cry going up which is talking about a double standard. The world has to check Iraq's nuclear installations, but not Israel's.
How can you compare it? Iraq is a dictatorship. Saddam Hussein is a killer. He killed 100,000 Kurds with gas bombs. How can you compare it at all? Just because he calls himself a state? Not a state, is a mafia. He's not a leader, he's a killer. You cannot say it about us.
But even in Israel, some do. The current Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, directed the invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Thousands of innocent civilians were killed. The worst excesses were in the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila, for which an Israeli inquiry held Sharon personally responsible. In Belgium, there are plans to prosecute him for alleged war crimes. While Sharon has been Prime Minister, 700 Israelis have been killed, but more than 2,000 Palestinians have died in attacks by Israeli soldiers. The Israeli army has used new, unidentified weapons. In February 2001, a new gas was used in Gaza. 180 patients were admitted to hospitals with severe convulsions.
The Israelis say this is tear gas, but this is not tear gas. We have never seen this gas before. We need some medicine for treatment, but it must be the right medicine.
We ask what kind of gas, but nobody verify for us the type of gas to give the antidote. at that moment. Also, we don't know how to check, how to examine, how to send this. We are in occupied area. We are surrounded. It's impossible to send these samples to international lab to test.
Israel's outside chemical and biological weapons treaties and still refuses to say what the new gas was. The Elofs have still not heard from the prison. Their flight home is tomorrow night, and they're worried that they may have to leave without seeing their adopted son. Today they're having lunch with a small group of activists who, for 16 years, have fought in vain for Vanunu's release.
About nuclear weapons, what about Israel and the nuclear weapons?
Imagine for one moment that Mordechai Vanunu was not an Israeli, that the whole story had happened with a Korean or an Iranian or a Pakistani technician. He would have had the Nobel Peace Prize. He would have been the second Sakharov. Instead, he is a non-person in the West. And this tells you what we are dealing with. We are dealing with the #1 privileged state on earth.
Counter to the Israeli argument that the whole world is against us. It is exactly the opposite. We started the nuclear race in the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. And there is not even one important state in the Western Hemisphere who is dealing with it seriously.
You can talk all you want. We can sit here till tomorrow morning and discuss Israel's nuclear policy. We can discuss whatever we want. It's the people who work in those areas, in the weapons of mass destruction, the environment, Dimona itself, all these research places. Vanunu is a living warning to them. This is what will happen to you if you speak out. You'll be Vanunized. That's the warning. You will spend 10 years in solitary confinement. You will be cut off from your family. You will be cut off from everyone who knows you. You will be this prisoner without a number and without a name. That's what will happen to you if you speak out.
It's the prison on the phone.
Oh, what is? Oh, how marvelous! What time? Well, if we come at 11, can we have an hour and a half? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
On their last day, the Elofs get their visit. After an hour and a half, they emerge with a message.
It's just wonderful. We're so excited we don't know what to think because he's... Oh, yeah, you talk.
It was a marvelous experience. It's the first time we've ever seen him so high and just anxious to talk about what's going on in his life and what he's looking forward to, especially the anticipation of getting out. He's just strong. That was his final word. Let him know that I'm strong and anxious to get out of here and out of Israel and just start a life all over again.
Yeah.
He was just beaming, I must say.
And he said the message to the world is that I have forgotten the last 16 years. I'm looking toward the future. I believe in a future of nonviolence.
So did he say he'd do it all again?
You know he did. He said, of course I would. Isn't that incredible?
The Elofs have gone, and Vanunu is again up for parole. But as usual, everything, even the location of the parole hearing, is secret. Apart from me and Peter Hounham, who's come from London, there are no other journalists here.
Mordechai Vanunu in there. Is that where the case is being held?
He is the most sensitive prisoner that this country's got, and whenever he comes here, they block off the windows of his van if they can, or in the early days they used to put a crash helmet over him so people couldn't see him, and at one point they even had an electronic device that emitted a screeching signal so people couldn't hear him speak.
And yet you and I are the only journalists here. Most